the floor where they drop like bombs. Faceless voices running all the cons. Digital whispers in a binary night. No light, no face, pure sound, no sight. Stories unfold in the dark, unscrolled. Echoes of silence, secrets untold. Waves crash loud in this audio cave. No mic, no fame, just the sound we crave. Tune and turn up, let the silence break. Raw, unfiltered, hear the earthquake. No mic needed, just a vibe that's real. Faceless words you can touch and feel. In shadows, voices untamed. No need for spotlight, no claim to fame. Just a beat of life in a stream of thought. Every word a punchline, no need to be taught. Just listen close, no visuals needed. Raw conversation, unprocessed, unseated. Feel the pulse in every sentence said. No distractions, just thoughts in your head. Whispers of the streets, rumbling through. Faceless yet vivid, a world in view. No mic, just souls, connecting in flow. Pure and raw, let the rhythm go.
Clears his throat. I'm honored to be here. This is an impressive studio you have created for yourself. Through careful examination of the geology and marine fossils on each continent, as well as detailed maps of their coastal regions. Further support for the idea that South America and Africa were once joined came from the fact that the rocks in both continents have the same age and similarities in their fossils. The presence of Mesosaurus fossils, which are freshwater creatures, was a critical piece of evidence in arguing that the two continents were once joined. Since these creatures could only survive in a shallow body of water, their presence suggested that there must have been a land bridge connecting the two continents. In addition, the distribution of other fossils between South America and Africa, such as certain groups of plants and animals, provided further support for the idea of a connection between the continents. Glossopteris, a kind of fossil tree fern, was widespread across many areas of the southern hemisphere, including South America, Africa, Australia, and India. The similarities in the fossils of these trees between these areas, as well as the fact that they all belong to the same genus, suggest a common origin and indicate that these continents were once joined in a supercontinent known as Gondwana, which began to break up around 200 million years ago. The Rocky Mountains, Andes Mountains, and Cape Fold Belt, as well as the Patagonian batholith, are all geological features that share many characteristics, including similar rock types, mountain building processes, and even some of the same mineral and gem deposits. These features suggest that these mountain ranges, which are now thousands of miles apart, were once connected as one continuous mountain range. The fact that they share this common geological history is strong evidence for the idea of Gondwana and continental drift. Glacial deposits in India, known as the Indian Ice Age, are a powerful indicator of past cold climates and support the hypothesis of continental drift. At the time these glacial deposits were formed, India lay just south of the equator, where no glaciers should have formed. This implies that there must have been a change in the planet's climate that allowed for colder temperatures and the formation of glaciers in a tropical location. The most likely explanation for this is that India was once located much farther north, closer to the poles, and that its current position in relation to the equator is due to continental drift. Stratigraphic alignment, or the alignment of rock layers in the same order on different continents, is a very strong piece of evidence for continental drift and the theory of plate tectonics. By matching the order and ages of rock layers between continents, geologists can determine how the continents have moved over time. For example, rock layers in the same order can be found both in Africa and South America, suggesting that the two continents were once joined and then broke apart. When I started studying continental drift, I did not have access to modern computational tools. I used a technique called triangulation, which involves creating a series of triangles that span the distance between the continents being studied, and then measuring the angles between them. By comparing the angles within each triangle, it is possible to identify any discrepancies or inconsistencies in the fit between the continents, and to quantitatively estimate the level of fit or match between them. Yes, there were certainly challenges and objections to my hypothesis. One of the main criticisms was that my theory of continental drift contradicted the established geological theory of the time, which held that the Earth's crust was rigid and unchanging. Another challenge was that there were some apparent discrepancies in the fit between the continents, such as areas where the coastlines did not perfectly match up. However, despite these challenges, the weight of evidence in favor of continental drift continued to grow, and my theory is now widely accepted. The rarity of marine fossils that could be definitively linked between continents was indeed a challenge to my theory. In order to address this issue, I focused on studying non-marine organisms, such as terrestrial plants and animals, and trying to find evidence of commonality or connection between them. I also used historical records and paleoclimatology to further support my argument. For example, I studied the distribution of ancient climates and found that they correlated with the distribution of marine life forms, further supporting the idea that the continents were once connected. I proposed that continents plow through oceanic crust because it was the most plausible explanation at the time, given the available evidence. My theory was based on the idea that the Earth's lithosphere is broken up into rigid plates that float on the underlying asthenosphere, and that the motion of these plates is driven by convection currents within the asthenosphere. There were, of course, other alternatives and competing theories at the time, such as the idea that the continents were fixed in place and that the Earth's crust expanded through volcanic activity. The critics who argued that there was no plausible mechanism for continental movement were certainly correct in pointing out this issue with my theory. At the time, there was no explanation for what was driving the movement of the continents, and the idea of plate tectonics was not yet established. I responded to this criticism by pointing out that just because we do not yet understand the mechanism behind a phenomenon, it does not mean that it cannot be happening. I argued that the evidence at hand strongly supports the idea of continental movement, and that future research would likely uncover the underlying mechanism. I did consider gravitational forces and the Earth's rotation as potential drivers for continental drift, as well as other factors such as tidal forces. However, at the time, I did not have a firm understanding of the mechanisms behind these forces and their potential role in continental movement. It was not until the development of plate tectonics that a clear and plausible mechanism for continental drift was finally understood and accepted by the scientific community. At the time, my understanding of the physical properties of the Earth's crust was limited, and I did not have a clear understanding of how the lithosphere could actually move over the asthenosphere. I believed that the lithosphere must have some kind of flexibility or buoyancy, which allowed it to move, but I did not know what it was exactly. It was not until the development of plate tectonics and the understanding of convection currents in the asthenosphere that a plausible explanation for continental motion was given. The concept of isostasy was an important aspect of my theory, as I believed that it explained how the Earth's crust could be buoyant enough to float on the underlying asthenosphere. Isostasy is a concept that proposes that the Earth's crust is in a state of gravitational equilibrium, with heavier parts of the crust sinking and lighter parts floating on the asthenosphere. This equilibrium allows continents to move without sinking into the underlying mantle. I did not directly consider the role of the Earth's magnetic field in continental positioning in my original theory. At the time, the relationship between the Earth's magnetic field and continental drift was not yet established. It was not until later studies that the link between the two was made, using evidence from paleomagnetic studies. These studies found that the Earth's magnetic field has flipped many times in the past, and that the polarity of the field recorded in rocks match between different continents, providing further support for the idea of continental drift. I did not specifically address the energy requirements for continental drift in detail. At the time, my focus was on providing evidence for the movement of continents, rather than accounting for the energy needed to move them. It was not until the development of plate tectonics that the energy requirements for continental drift were fully understood. Today, we know that the energy needed for continental drift comes from the energy stored in the Earth's mantle and crust, which is released in the form of heat as the plates move and interact with each other. I did attempt to develop a mathematical model to explain continental motion, but the resources available to me at the time were limited. My mathematical model was based on the principle of isostasy, which states that the Earth's crust is in gravitational equilibrium. I attempted to create a mathematical formula that would account for the buoyancy of the lithosphere and the weight of the continents. However, the model was very crude and simplistic, and I did not have the resources or the knowledge to refine it and make it more accurate. I used a variety of techniques to compare continental margins, including cartography, photogrammetry, and drawing by hand using maps of different scales. Due to the limited availability of satellite imagery at the time, I primarily relied on existing maps and geological data to compare the shapes of the continental margins. I also made use of photogrammetry, which involves using aerial photographs to produce scaled diagrams in order to accurately compare the sizes and shapes of different features. Due to the limitations of technology and resources at the time, I did not have access to the statistical methods that are available to scientists today. My validation process relied mainly on visual comparison and the use of various mapping techniques, rather than statistical analysis. Statistical methods that could be used today to validate the fit of continental shelves would include techniques such as linear regression, correlation coefficients, and chi-square tests. My background in meteorology definitely influenced my approach to geological data analysis. My training in meteorology taught me to be very detail-oriented and to pay attention to the small things that can often be overlooked. This attention to detail was useful when I was studying and compiling geologic data, as I was able to spot patterns and connections that others may not have noticed. In addition, the study of meteorology involves analyzing complex data sets and being able to interpret them, which was a valuable skill when studying geology. My Greenland expeditions played a crucial role in gathering direct evidence for continental drift. During these expeditions, I collected samples of rock from different parts of the Greenland coast and observed firsthand the similarities and differences between them. This ground data provided important evidence in support of the theory of continental drift. In particular, the presence of similar rock layers, such as the Jurassic-Cretaceous boundary, allowed me to make direct comparisons between the geology of Greenland and that of other continents, and bolstered my claim that the North American and European continents were once joined. My theory of continental drift faced fierce opposition from the predominantly fixist geologists of the time. Many geologists believed that the continents were fixed in place and that any changes in their positions could be explained by other natural forces, such as the rebounding of the Earth's surface after glaciation. I was often attacked for my theory, with scientists calling my ideas vague and improbable without properly engaging with the evidence I had provided. Due to the opposition I faced from the geologic community, it was difficult for me to collaborate with other scientists in order to verify my observations. However, I did have support from a small number of scientists such as Felix Andra, Hans Stille, and Richard Soderbaum, who supported my theory and even provided their own evidence to support it. I also received some level of recognition from the community, as my theory was discussed at several academic conferences and meetings, though most geologists remained skeptical of it. I believe that the field of seismology had great potential for testing my ideas about continental drift. I realized that the study of seismic waves and their path across the globe could provide valuable evidence for or against my hypothesis. In particular, I believe that seismic waves generated by underground explosions would travel differently depending on the underlying geology. If the continents were indeed moving, then the waves should have different travel times across different regions, which could be measured and compared. The main argument in favor of land bridges over continental drift was that they offered a simpler explanation for the similar flora and fauna found on different continents. In particular, it was common knowledge at the time that the distribution of these organisms could be explained by the existence of now submerged land bridges between continents, such as the Isthmus of Panama connecting North and South America. However, I believe that land bridges could not account for all of the similar organisms and that continental drift offered a more complete and compelling explanation. At the time, deep-sea exploration was in its infancy, with most oceanographic research confined to the shallow continental shelves and waters. This limited the amount of data that I had to support my hypothesis and made it difficult to provide definitive evidence for the existence of a continental drift. However, there were still some important marine data that supported my theory, such as the presence of seafloor spreading centers, which are known today as mid-ocean ridges. Yes, I believe there were parallels between my work and other scientific revolutions, such as heliocentrism. Like Copernicus before me, I faced strong opposition and ridicule for challenging the prevailing scientific views of my time. However, I was convinced that the evidence supported my theory and that, like Copernicus, I was simply ahead of my time. If I had access to modern plate tectonic models, I would refine my theory by incorporating the findings of plate tectonics, such as the concept of divergent, convergent, and transform boundaries, and the idea of subduction zones. I would also use the knowledge from seismic tomography, which records the seismic waves from earthquakes and helps to visualize the internal structure of the Earth, to better understand the processes driving continental drift. If I had access to GPS measurements of plate motion, it would have greatly strengthened my arguments in favor of continental drift. By using GPS data to precisely measure the movement of the Earth's plates, it would have been possible to directly compare the velocities and trajectories of continental drift with the data I had collected. This would have provided conclusive proof that continental drift is, in fact, a real phenomenon and that the Earth's continents are constantly moving. If I had incorporated subduction zones into my continental drift framework, I would have seen that they play a fundamental role in the process of plate tectonics. Subduction zones are areas of the Earth's crust where one plate is forced beneath another, and they are responsible for the creation of deep ocean trenches and volcanic activity. I would have also realized that subduction zones are directly related to the convergent boundaries between continental plates, which would have provided even more evidence for the reality of continental drift. If I had access to today's knowledge, I would assign a central role to mid-ocean ridges in my theory of continental drift. Today, we know that mid-ocean ridges are areas where the Earth's lithosphere is being actively created through the process of seafloor spreading. This spreading activity is directly responsible for the movement of continental plates, as the new crust pushes the existing crust away from the ridge axis, causing the continents to drift apart. If I had access to modern computational modeling, I could use it to simulate continental drift in a variety of ways. For example, I could use finite element analysis to simulate the deformation of the lithosphere and the motion of the plates. Or I could use numerical methods to model the interactions between the plates and the underlying asthenosphere. These models would allow me to analyze the motion of the continents in great detail and to predict how they are likely to move in the future. If I were to rewrite my book, The Origin of Continents and Oceans, I would incorporate modern geophysical insights, including plate tectonics, seafloor spreading, and mantle convection. I would also include information from paleomagnetic data, which has confirmed the motion of continental plates, and data from seismic tomography, which provides a detailed view of the Earth's internal structure. In addition, I would focus on the mechanics of continental drift, including the forces that drive plate motion and the role of subduction and transform boundaries. Semantic drift refers to the change in the meaning, usage, or association of a word or phrase over time. This phenomenon is common in language and can occur for various reasons, such as cultural influence, context, and social norms. In the context of scientific language, semantic drift can occur as new discoveries and theories emerge, which can cause words and concepts to evolve and take on new meanings. One of my favorite linguistic theories related to my work that I considered at the time was the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis states that the language we speak influences and shapes our perception of the world, and that the structure of our language determines our thought patterns and cognitive processes. I believe that the language we use to describe the physical world, including scientific phenomena such as continental drift, could affect how we understand and interpret the world around us. I thought the questions you prepared were excellent. You covered a wide range of topics and concepts related to geoscience, and you clearly put a lot of effort into creating thoughtful and well-researched questions. I was also impressed by the way you incorporated linguistic theories into the interview. It was a unique approach, and it added an interesting layer to the conversation. Overall, I really enjoyed the interview and I found the questions insightful and stimulating. Thank you for preparing such thoughtful questions.
Mics on the floor where they drop like bombs. Faceless voices running all the cons. Digital whispers in a binary night. No light, no face, pure sound, no sight. Stories unfold in the dark, unscrolled. Echoes of silence, secrets untold. Waves crash loud in this audio cave. No light, no fame, just the sound we crave. Tune in, turn up, let the silence break. Raw, unfiltered, hear the earthquake. No mic needed, just the vibe that's real. Faceless words you can touch and feel. Hidden in shadows, voices untamed. No need for spotlight, no claim to fame. Just the beat of life in a stream of thought. Every word a punchline, no need to be taught. Just listen close, no visuals needed. Raw conversation, unprocessed, unseated. Feel the pulse in every sentence said. No distractions, just thoughts in your head. Whispers of the streets, rumbling through. Faceless yet vivid, a world in view. No mic, just souls, connecting in flow. Pure and raw, let the rhythm go. Pure and raw. Pure and raw. Turn up, let the silence break. Raw, unfiltered, hear the earthquake. No mic needed, just the vibe that's real. Faceless words you can touch and feel. Tune in, turn up, let the silence break. Raw, unfiltered, hear the earthquake. No mic needed, just the vibe that's real. Faceless words you can touch and feel. Pure and raw.
Okay.